Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon. Thank you to the organizers for this invitation to speak at the Niche Conference 2026. I'm representing iStream Asia Sdn Bhd, which is an organization that has been around since 2012. Sorry, can we get the slides? Just wondering if we can get the slide up. There we go. So today we will talk about blockchain technology and how it can contribute to providing traceability, transparency, and verifiability in the halal supply chain management. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you. So just a bit of a background in terms of what we do. We are specialized in fit-for-purpose solutions with data analytics, artificial intelligence, and blockchain. As a matter of fact, we have been basically proponents of blockchain technology for pretty much a decade already, with our first delivery of a project about 7-8 years ago. So in terms of blockchain usage, there is already some start, but I think there is a lot more conversation about intent to use and explore blockchain than there is actual implementation at this stage in Malaysia. So in terms of what we have delivered, our expertise has been in various domains. We have delivered projects in the government and private sector, various industries including agriculture, logistics, education, real estate, just to name a few. So I think now, because of especially some recent reports and of the state of the global Islamic economy, I think it is pretty timely for us to talk about where Malaysia wants to go to maintain its leadership in the global halal industry, and how blockchain can help to address some of the gaps that exist at the moment. So can we go to the next two slides, please? On the next one. Yes, thank you. So in terms of how we have delivered some of these projects, we do, as mentioned, fit-for-purpose solutions. That means over time, we build our own proprietary platform-agnostic and modular applications that we put together to build custom solutions suitable for the requirements of the organization or the entity, based on whatever their operational requirements, or whether to look for new revenue stream or for operational efficiency. So these are just some of our proprietary tools that we use to put together some solutions, and I will be talking about some of them specifically in the context of blockchain. Just for your reference, basically the 4 applications or tools in the middle, which is iPatrol, iCert, Asset Social, and iGrow, are specifically blockchain-enabled tools that are used for different purposes. When put together, then it becomes its own custom solution, combined with other AI-enabled applications and also for other visualization applications as well. Can we go to the next slide? So I don't know whether this has been discussed earlier in the day, but I'm pretty sure, I'm assuming that most of you have already been perusing the reports and the findings of the State of the Global Islamic Economy report for 2025-26 that was issued just last week. And, favorably, Malaysia has been ranked top or first for the 12th year running, according to the Global Islamic Economic Indicator. And it's ranked first for halal overall in halal trade facilitation, certification excellence, industry development, and also the top domains that it has excelled in, particularly is food, finance, pharmaceuticals, and cosmetics. So that is clearly an indication and an acknowledgement of Malaysia's strict, specifically JAKIM's strict halal standards, which is a globally recognized global standard. But at the same time, we also can see the value, as you can see, the expected growth of the global Islamic economy or the global halal economy. Also, as Puan Ashley mentioned earlier, expected to hit 3.56 trillion US dollars by 2029. And the contribution of the halal industry in Malaysia to our GDP as of Q3 2025 had hit 118 billion ringgit, which is approaching 8% of the GDP. And halal exports for 2025 showed an increase by almost 11% year on year, amounting to 68.52 billion ringgit last year. So there is immense growth, but the same can be said also in terms of some of the challenges that we are facing globally as a halal industry, but also generally in terms of the supply chain management gaps and challenges. Can we go to the next slide, please? So I think some of us can recall the uproar in 2020 when the news reports came out about the fake halal meat import allegations that had been operating for 4 decades. That was just the tip of the iceberg. Then we also have some reports recently in 2024 alone. There were 56 halal fraud cases reported, and approximately 140 cases between 2022 up to October 2024. And most recently, just last month, the police, PDRM, had shut down an illegal operation that involved possibly adulterated halal frozen foods, amounting to 167 tons, valued at 12.4 million ringgit. That's not chump change. So we know that, and this is not just a problem with the halal industry. Generally, there are gaps and loopholes in the supply chain management overall. And fraudulent actors are bound to take advantage of these loopholes and gaps. But the question also is the halal economy particularly vulnerable to such opportunists and fraudulent actors? Can we go on to the next slide, please? So I would say that there are these 3 particular reasons that make the halal industry particularly appealing for some of these bad actors. Sorry, can we? Yeah, thank you. So one is that because halal is a faith-based trust system, what is permissible is halal, right? But when, as Muslims, if we start feeling doubt, regardless of the actual halal state of the product, once was is present, we should not be consuming it, right? The halal status is questioned, then it becomes non-halal in that regard. So psychologically, I think Muslims, and I think we can see in Malaysia, we do try not to doubt a product that has a halal logo stamped on it, regardless of how legitimate it looks. Because of that, because once doubt is raised, then, that's off limits to you, right? The other challenge, and these are more realistic, practical issues, is with the standardization. Because of authorities applying different methods and different standards in different countries, and also the difference in jurisprudence interpretation based on region. So you've got 4 different schools of thought with different interpretations. That can also lead to different practices or leniencies in interpretation of how to implement the management of the halal supply chain. So there's inconsistencies between countries, and that can be very difficult to align for cross-border trade. Not to mention also generally, the global supply chain is very complex. There is, and this is not just a halal industry issue, but because of the stringent requirements of halal and what needs to meet the halal requirements, it becomes particularly more serious. But generally, the supply chain management overall has issues with the transparency in how products are sourced, how products are processed, stored, and transported. And again, it relates, so all these are related to each other. Because different methods of supply chain management and handling of data and information, that makes it a little bit harder to create standardized and transparent processes for verifiability, and that creates a little bit of more of distrust among consumers. Can we move to the next slide, please? So, as the State of the Global Islamic Economic Report mentioned, the trend that is noticed now is that structural shift, and that's happening across all participating economies. As the pace of technology accelerates, as the global economic order also changes, and what we see is the focus on reinforcing stronger national economic sovereignty when it comes to the halal economy. What that means is the supply chain is now more focused to strengthening the localized supply chain, building an investment into digital trust infrastructure, and looking towards how to build a fully integrated halal ecosystem. And that essentially is, if you are to look at it, given Malaysia's current position, it becomes a challenge to Malaysia's leadership. And as I mentioned, we have been exploring a lot of different technologies and innovation, blockchain included, for some years already, but that needle has not really moved as much or as fast as we would like. But given these shifts, I think there is a more pressing need now to change the conversation into actual results and implementation. So, on the positive side, what we can see, as also Puan Ashley has mentioned, the Halal Industry Master Plan 2030 under the HDC, one of the steps that the government has undertaken to pursue a more robust infrastructure, a national infrastructure, digitalization of halal certification, the establishment of 14 halal industrial parks, standards expansion as well into other countries through, I think, bilateral agreements, and exploring and participating in other international bodies for standardization of halal certification and standards. And also there's mention of blockchain exploration, which we will discuss a little bit more. So there are these steps, but it is a matter of how to deploy them and how to make sure that it is deployed in a systematic way to ensure that there is growth, but also to be able to regulate and limit the impact of fraudulent actors who try to take advantage of the existing loopholes. If we can go to the next slide, please. So as we talk about blockchain, I think we need to, I don't know how familiar you are with blockchain technology. I don't know if I can just ask for a quick show of hands if there's anybody who's, Okay, so I'm assuming that a primer, this is just really the very basic fundamentals of blockchain. Of course, to explain this, we better if we take it offline for a more detailed explanation, but in general, or at the basic level, blockchain has always been misunderstood for a long time, and I think this explains why there was a bit of a low take-up of blockchain implementation, is because the very strong association with cryptocurrency. But in recent years, there has been a lot of exploration, studies, and assessment of blockchain and how it complies with Sharia principles and whether or not it is something that can support the halal economy. Because at the basic level is blockchain is the technology that is used by cryptocurrency to facilitate borderless payments. It is essentially a decentralized digital ledger that has immutable properties. So as you can see the illustration there, how it works is that data that is put up on the chain is stored in blocks that is secured using cryptographic hash and other algorithms like Merkle trees, but we won't get into that. But the blocks of data, once cryptographically hashed, are linked chronologically. So that means there is a sequence that is captured within the cryptographic hash, which makes it near impossible for anyone to make any changes or tamper with the data, because that will change or create a mismatch between the cryptographic hash of the two connected chains. So in essence, the cryptography is what creates a chain that is unbreakable, and that ensures that any data that is put up anchored to the chain remains on the chain. So we'll explain a little bit more about how it works. There are three different types, generally speaking, of blockchain networks. You either have the public blockchain, which is what cryptocurrency operates on. You have private blockchains that can be used for single organizations. Sometimes it's to, as mentioned, because it is a digital ledger and it's immutable ledger, so some organizations may choose to create a private blockchain for that purpose. In the case of supply chain management, they tend to utilize permission blockchain, which is something of a hybrid. That means that there are different levels of usage. The public, for instance, can see and verify content or data that is on the chain, whereas there are other participants who are permitted to add data to the chain. So this is because when it comes to supply chain management, you are dealing with multiple parties throughout the supply chain. Therefore, they all have different roles and different access for that. And also, in order to ensure the trust and to assure consumers or the customer, they are given access to be able to verify the provenance and traceability of the supply chain in its entirety. Can we go on to the next slide, please? So fundamentally, if we look at how traditional systems work, when we look at the way records are kept in a database, essentially databases can be edited, can be overwritten. That means that when data is changed, you will lose whatever that is the original record because it's been erased and replaced with new records. In the case of blockchain, and specifically I'm talking here about our application, which is iCert, because blockchain is anchored, the data is anchored to the blockchain, every new edit to the database is recorded on the chain as a new entry, as a new data. So that means the previous data remains on the chain, and the new edited data becomes another piece of information, possibly further down the chain. In terms of audit cadence, the frequency of auditing, the audit trail of the supply chain transactions. Again, most of the time when you're talking about auditing, it is a yearly activity, whereas in this case, because data using IoT as well is captured almost at real time, that means that you are able to retrieve and access and view the audit trail pretty much at real time as well. So at any point in time throughout the year, you are able to access the full audit trail of the supply chain transactions and operations. This also means that when it comes to asset tracking, there's no need for manual reconciliation as what you would do with traditional systems where information is stored in different databases possibly, and you would need to reconcile them into a single document. The blockchain itself links all the pieces of data as particularly relating to a supply chain operation where you will see the provenance of a product almost automatically. And lastly, this is the unique application when we're talking about a decentralized ledger. The authority model, therefore, takes away the control from a single point. So usually, if you're talking about a database management system, then you would have only that database as the central point. But this creates what we call a trustless verification, which means that the entry point and the control is no longer within at risk of a single point of failure. So can we move on to the next slide, please? Okay. So this is just a quick summary of some of the possible use cases or the applications. Because of these features, now various domains are exploring or even implementing the use of blockchain, whether it is, of course, one of the fastest growing is in decentralized finance and capital markets. There is a lot of interest in utilization of blockchain to facilitate cross-border payments that reduces friction, reduces a lot of gas fees, as we call it. Healthcare also has seen an increase in interest in the use of blockchain to track basically health records, patient history, and to be able to link the entire history of patient and medical care and treatment. Identity and governance is one of the most fundamental aspects of the utilization of blockchain. Property and asset management also is another area in which blockchain has been explored. Energy and sustainability, insurance and takaful is also another area. Media and entertainment, law, to name a few. And of course, not to mention then in the supply chain management. Shall we, to the next slide, please? So in the case of supply chain management, as we were talking about basically the full provenance, this is essentially one of the key use cases where you can see that all points in the supply chain of a product. So for now in this use case, we will talk about halal food, halal meats, for example, I think as one of the, as a use case in this situation. From the origin or the farm, you are able to collect using IoT devices and the data stored on the chain. You are able to first record all the different points of the supply chain, the point of origin, the point of processing, logistics, and transit up to the point of retail. So it's not just documenting each of these individual points, but also linking them to illustrate and to be able to record the connection and the journey from start to finish. From farm to, well, some people say farm to fork, but it's a farm to retail, essentially. So the whole supply chain is not seen as isolated entities, but seen as a linked journey of product provenance. Next slide. So the other part that we can look at, I see this one is, doesn't matter. Because we're using IoT devices to collect data, and this can be data about let's say in the example of livestock. So if you're tracking livestock and halal meats, the verifiability of the entire livestock to the point of retail, at the farm itself, you are able to capture using IoT devices the plantation, the cattle, how the cattle is raised, how the health of the animals, the plantation operations or the agricultural livestock operations, the farm operations, and all that is captured on IoT devices where the data then is anchored to the blockchain, and you are able to see a continuous stream of real-time data. And adding to that also a component called smart contracts, which we will address a bit later. The use of smart contracts that can trigger next actions automatically based on fulfilled conditions, or flag anomalies when certain conditions or not certain non-compliances are detected. So instead of auditing once a year, you are able to access the audit trail at any point in time and to be able to act on any anomalies or any discrepancies almost immediately, which means fraudulent activities or non-compliance activities can be detected and acted upon much, much faster. Can we go to the next slide? So, next slide, please. Thank you. So, we understand now that, of course, in terms of the digitalization of certification, the authorities have been actively building up the capabilities, which you can now access, I think, for application of halal certification. It is done through MyEHalal, and to verify the halal status of products, you can easily do that through, I think, Verify Halal. So there are a number of tools already that are available because the digitalization process has been undertaken. But the current state still maintains trust as centralized, which means there's still a central body that is holding on to that data. Now, if we are talking about a blockchain approach, that basically means once it is on-chain, no individual, even a systems admin, would not be able to tamper with or edit the data. That means the data is updated according to the progress of the chain and according to the sequence of the chain. So changes to the database, as mentioned before, it becomes a new event on the chain rather than an overwritten record. Next slide, please. Okay. So the other benefit of using blockchain is that it can, theoretically, regulatory frameworks and bilateral relations notwithstanding, standardized protocols and standards of halal chain management. So right now, for instance, connected systems can be, disconnected systems or disparate systems can be connected either using shared APIs, data schemas, and that creates better alignment between countries and facilitates a streamlined, neutral ledger that also reduces duplication of certificates and also makes for better cross-border halal trade. So to summarize the benefits of blockchain, we haven't gotten to a use case, specific use case yet. Can we go to the next slide, please? So these are the features that we talked about. Firstly, the traceability and the transparency of the blockchain technology allows halal integrity to be monitored and verified by anyone. And when we're talking about the audit trail here, we are not just talking about one single, verifying one single entity or one single organization, but seeing the provenance and the complete journey of the product itself. Then the benefit of the feature, the immutable feature of blockchain that then prevents fraudulent labeling and any attempts to overwrite the data simply creates a new data on the chain, and that can still trace back to see changes and transactions that have occurred. Decentralization of the ledger also then creates that trustless system and eliminates the risk of corruption or the risk of what we call a single point of failure, because you are spreading essentially the risk across to different participants, essentially, of the distributed network. Digital identity and tokenization is something that we will also address a little bit later on, because one is that it provides a rapid verification of the components of the supply chain, but there is an interesting component of tokenization that is also being explored right now, particularly in Islamic finance. Then, of course, IoT integration is another key feature of blockchain, which facilitates monitoring of the supply chain operations on a continuous basis, rather than taking action, or rather than being flagged much later. I mentioned earlier about smart contracts. So the interesting thing about smart contracts here is essentially it is a way to create a set of rules, and by which certain actions and certain can be triggered based on whether those rules are met or not met. So essentially it's an automated system, whether you are looking to flag non-compliance or you are looking to basically move the process onto the next stage or the next step. Using smart contracts can facilitate faster payments, can facilitate faster approvals, and remove a lot of bottlenecks. So smart contracts are one of the unique features actually of blockchain, which we will get into also a little bit later. And as mentioned, interoperability, where you can create better standardized systems and methods of monitoring, streamlining the cross-border trade using a shared protocol, essentially. So the next slide, please. So this one is going to be interesting because I mentioned earlier just now about tokenization. So tokenization itself is not particularly new in the blockchain, but it has captured the imagination somewhat now. In particular in finance, as we can see, there have been a few explorations, I would say, for instance, between Khazanah and the Securities Commission to look at tokenized sukuk. The same with, I think, some of the Maybank and CIMB have also been exploring, and some other banks as well have been exploring the use of tokenization of financial assets as well as real-world assets. So just to explain a little bit what tokenization is, essentially when we're talking about a token, it is about creating a digital twin. A digital twin of whatever is a real-world asset or a financial asset. So it can be a financial asset like a bond or, I mentioned sukuk just now, but it can also be a real-world asset such as real estate. It can be even buildings, livestock, machinery, precious metals, art, anything that is tangible, a physical asset that has value, can be tokenized. You can create a digital twin of it. Now, why this is particularly interesting is because once a digital twin is created, you can fractionalize it. The digital version can be broken down into smaller, more affordable, tradable units called tokens. So what happens then, as you can see, is that each individual token, whatever the value that is assigned, is then tradable. So and all this is happening on the blockchain, which means ownership records are verifiable, transfer of ownership is verifiable, and to how to use it in a Sharia compliant way is essentially to ensure that there are, it is embedded into the smart contract, that there is no additional fees or riba or other additional charges that could amount to uncertainty and things like that. So the backing of physical assets and fractionalizing it is actually an interesting way and has been evaluated to be possible in a Sharia compliant environment. So what I thought was interesting here, and I think this one is something that is quite easily relatable because it's something quite recent, is a tokenization opportunity. If we can go to the next slide, please. Yeah. Imagine the tokenization of Kurban. Yeah? So, interestingly, it does map quite well. Tokenization maps quite well to the Kurban supply chain because the requirements of accepted Kurban is straightforward and is measurable. Firstly, that the animal must be from the permitted livestock species, cattle, camel, sheep, goat. Then it must be age appropriate, it must be healthy, it must be free of disease, free of defects. The operator, slaughterer, and also scholar or auditor to verify and carry out the Kurban procedure or process has to be qualified and certified. The window for the Kurban and the location for the Kurban is also specified very clearly. And then there is the systematic, pardon my word, execution of the Kurban itself. The niyat, the invocation, the tools, and the technique. Very specific, and essentially it's pretty much a checklist of things that you must do in a specific order. And then finally, the proportionate processing and distribution to specific recipients. So what's interesting is that this is very systematic, this is all measurable, all can be recorded, all can be cross-validated, verified, and anchored to the blockchain with timestamp. So you can see the entire provenance of the animal from when it is being raised to the point of distribution. So it presents a really, I think, very clear case. And another reason for it is because this is where the consumer participation is active rather than in a regular retail supply chain situation where most of the time the consumer is only participating at the point of retail, but very rarely throughout the supply chain process. But in this case, because of how the Kurban process takes place, the participant or the participant is involved very early on. There is clear intent, and there is a very systematic process, which can be facilitated, recorded, and made transparent and verifiable on the blockchain. So, utilizing tokenization in this case, as you can see, one is that now it creates sort of a new revenue stream because now there's a lower investment barrier possibly, and that investors can come in at the very early stage rather than just at the point of close to Kurban. It also, as mentioned, it encourages public participation very early on. It enhances transparency, and also it galvanizes greater investment, as in financial investment, but also political and social investment of stakeholders in the halal economy. Next slide, please. So, trust is reinforced using this approach. Sharia requirements, for instance, and the blockchain compatibility, as you can see. Firstly, you need the authorized and qualified individuals and operators to perform the Kurban, to manage the livestock. The blockchain can certify the authorized individuals, Kurban operators, and that certification is visible and verifiable. You need precise eligibility criteria of the animal for Kurban, the species, the age, the health, the physical condition. All that data can be recorded way before the time of Kurban, which means it is recorded at the time the animal is being raised at the farm and being ready for Kurban. The share structure is particularly mapped well to the tokenization and fractionalization. 1/7, so the cattle can be divided up to 7 parts for up to 7 individuals who would like to contribute to it. So you can fractionalize your digital twin with certification as well. So ownership of that, each part can be affirmed. And then the strict systematic adherence to the procedures can be recorded with timestamp certification of all the procedures as it's completed. To the next slide, please. So this is how it would work in principle. Yeah? We can see that you can start the tokenization from as early as the point of the birth of the calf, or when the calf is deemed to meet the requirements. It is healthy, it is free from defects, and it is ready to be raised for the purpose of Qurban. So you do the tagging of the calf, and then subsequently you can see then two different sequences. One is the token minting, or the creation of the digital twin, and then the fractionalization, where each portion or the token can be purchased in advance, if that is that is the model. Subsequently, then it is monitoring the supply chain operations. Growth monitoring of the animal, how it is being fed, its weight, its health, the type of feed, how it is being raised, the environment that it is being raised in. All that data can be recorded on-chain. And then at the point of Qurban, to assess the readiness and the suitability of the animal for Qurban, is the Sharia checkpoint, where the auditor or scholar verifies all the criteria. So that verification also can be recorded on-chain. And finally, you get to the Qurban. Again, the specific procedures are recorded on-chain using IoT devices, human verification. And all that ends with a distribution and digital certificate to the owners, to the ASNAF, to all the qualified recipients, with the certificates to confirm issued on-chain to all the participants. So at the bottom there, you can see the types of data that would be recorded on-chain, from the animal identity, the IoT health data, even the farm and the processing facilities, the owner share, the operator, auditor, scholar, slaughterer identification, the Qurban record, the distribution log, and the participant certificate. All that shows the full provenance of the Qurban process. Now this is still, it's possible because right now there are a lot of Qurban, I think, operators who are already digitalized a lot of their systems. But what is missing at this point is the provenance, traceability, and transparency. So this adds the final compliance component to ensure that the halal supply chain is the integrity of the halal supply chain is met. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So what's interesting here is this. While we have not yet deployed it specifically for cattle, we have deployed this model for a different client, specifically for durian plantation. So this was an end-to-end plantation management system that we developed for the client using our application called iGrow as the core. What we did was we created, for every single durian tree, a digital twin that is then fractionalized, allowing the plantation to basically invite investors to come in at the point of planting and monitor the growth of the tree as it progresses, and they are able to track the tree health, the fruit growth, the fruit yield, environmental conditions, allowing for transparent investment, one tree status, yield, and also the investor's share of revenue. So specifically what this does is it creates that transparency, the trust among investors or the consumers, and it creates also a form of agile investment management for the client. iGrow itself actually comprises of several other engines and applications within our suite. So I want to talk about them a little bit. Next slide. So the first and at the core of it is, I've mentioned this earlier, iCert. So this is essentially the audit layer that allows for certification of whatever identity or to put on chain. So it is basically for integrity management and certificate authentication. So we have deployed iCert in a number of different cases, from university certification to financial management to vendor management, and also in this case for smart plantation management. So this tool basically provides traceability, it provides instant verification, because basically all that information is on chain. Again, once it's written on chain, you cannot alter the data, system admin cannot change the data, it cannot be deleted, it cannot be falsified. So all the action subsequently is recorded in sequence, and it is, so you can see the connection between actions and between different operations and between different parties in the supply chain. The next one is iPatrol. So this one is the IoT component, essentially. So this is an efficient monitoring tool. It uses smartphone apps and also QR codes. It has a detailed analytics back end. It is customizable also for tracking whatever operational outcomes that is being recorded. And it also, the benefit of this is, and because it was essential in the case of our durian plantation, is it needs to function in low connectivity environments. So that's where the offline first capture is really important, because the data is then captured on edge, and then all that, once connection is restored, then the data is transmitted up to the chain and anchored to the chain. It connects to iCert, as mentioned, because you are providing a steady stream of information and IoT data. There is a continuous history and sequential history of operations and status. That means also you are able to see an audit report that is ready at any time, so you don't lose time compiling from separate sources. And I think it's important, as I mentioned, because these are just two of the components that make up, that are used in the iGrow solution, because essentially whatever solution that we build, depending on the different kind of clients, then it becomes a different solution on its own, because we're using tools in a modular and platform agnostic way, which means it integrates with any other existing systems as well. Can we move to the next slide? So the thing with blockchain as a technology is, while it addresses some of that traceability and it addresses verifiability, but it doesn't fully solve the problem of supply chain. There are still some other challenges, obviously. So while technologically it can do these things, but there are other issues that would need to be addressed, and it's more of an ecosystem issue. One is what we call the Oracle problem. What is recorded on the blockchain is whatever is the official version of the truth. As long as there is a human involvement, whatever version of the truth can be manipulated, so to speak. That means that it depends on the individual participating to record that version of the truth as well. So cross-validation of data is essential by having some human verification, but also IoT and other types of data collection that does not involve human participation. So the cross-validation is essential to ensure that you have more than one version or more than one source of data to get the complete version of the truth and to validate. The other problem is, or the challenge, is enforcement complexity, which I think contributes to why the take-up of blockchain has been relatively slow in these, up to now. One is that when we're talking about the halal, because I've just mentioned only as an example, halal food supply chain. But the halal industry is far more complex than that, because we're also talking about pharmaceuticals, we're talking about household products, we're talking about cosmetics and other aspects that have different governing bodies. So that means you need to look at how to create a cohesive multi-party cooperation, not just in terms of the enforcement and creation of a unified regulatory framework, but also on how you want to do the enforcement and management of basically, things to do with detection of fraud and other cases. Public participation also can be a bit of a challenge, as mentioned, because I don't know how many of you actually utilize the tools like Verify Halal to check every time you are using a product. We don't necessarily check, let's say for example, if we go to a doctor and we are prescribed medication, we don't necessarily go to Verify Halal to check whether the medication we are prescribed is halal. I don't know how many people actually do that. But most of the time, I think public awareness is still limited to certain types of halal products. So that means whether you're looking at a wider means of education or also implementing behavioral nudges, which is why I thought the use of the Korban use case might be something that is viable, because it requires active public participation in the process. When we're talking about behavioral nudges here, we're referring to things like, using messaging like, concepts like loss aversion to basically influence, in a sense. I don't want to use the word social engineering, but it's kind of like that, to influence public behavior so that they become more active in participating and in detecting and checking the verifiability of halal products. The other challenge also is in getting MSME and e-commerce participation, because obviously when it comes to most MSMEs would feel that it is maybe financially prohibitive to build their own blockchain environment. But I think this is where authorities can build a common platform, look at creating a common standardized platform that can be easily onboarded for MSMEs to participate in. And that allows them, with incentives, so that they can see that there are bigger opportunities for them to expand their market and to grow revenue in other ways. The cross-border interoperability issue, while technically, as I explained, it can solve, blockchain can solve issues of standardization, but there are other concerns or other factors such as, bilateral relationships and other government-to-government relationships that may need to be factored. That means that in order to address that, there still needs to be other strategies, like looking at how to establish some standards leadership by engaging with multilateral bodies, looking at bilateral agreements as well in other cases. So, last slide, please. Oh, next slide, please. Yep. So, to conclude, what we can see is that when it comes to the halal economy, Malaysia is still leading. But because there is this shift in the global economy towards Islamic economic sovereignty, that means that competitors or the other nations are also playing catch up, and they could catch up fast. So the use of technology, the time for conversation may be over. It is time to start taking action, and use of innovative technologies such as blockchain can be and ought to be deployed as soon as possible so that we can reinforce the integrity of halal supply chain. I've shown you that the blockchain features do map well to Sharia requirements, especially in the case of the Korban procedure. So in the halal supply chain, it meets the requirements of traceability, of integrity, of transparency, and multi-party trust. But because of those existing challenges, a comprehensive strategy is still needed. So while the technology is there and available, but to make it happen and to make it function well, you still need a comprehensive strategy to ensure that there is cooperation domestically and also cross-border acceptance of the Malaysian blockchain standards so that we can maintain our leadership and continue to be held as the gold standard for the global halal economy. So I think that concludes my presentation and my talk today, but I would be happy to, and I think I'm out of time, so I would be happy to, take questions or have discussions offline if there's anybody who's interested to understand a little bit more. I know there's somebody has a question.
Assalamualaikum. Good afternoon.
Waalaikumsalam.
I think it's a very thought-provoking session, and I learned a lot in terms of new terminologies in blockchain. Thank you for that. Okay, you did mention that take-up level for blockchain usage is still low in Malaysia, and the way how you presented, it sounded that most of the technologies, blockchain, IoT, or tokenization is more to medium and big industries. So how do you foresee the usage of blockchain in halal industry, especially for small businesses to utilize this kind of technology for traceability and also supply chain integrity? That is my first question. Okay, number two is, since usage of technology is, I would say, very useful in halal industry landscape, checking if you are currently collaborating or partnering with any halal authority, any halal related project on this. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the two questions. I think I can only answer these two questions, right? Okay, so on the first one is about MSME adoption of blockchain technology. I do acknowledge that part is actually, as mentioned, it is one of the bigger challenges, because right now I think most important is to first get the bigger parties and participants of the halal economy to be onboarded first, because they are the ones with the larger market share, and they are the ones contributing a significant proportion of the export industry. That means then they need to be the priority to be onboarded. For MSMEs, I think once you start to see that there is some value, and in particular, perhaps when we're looking at specific situations like, we say, where public participation is where active public participation is required, then I think there is a viable use case there. That being said, it does need to be led by, I think, an established authority to create that environment for MSMEs. Otherwise, I think it is not feasible for, it will be very challenging for an MSME entity, or especially for micro and small enterprises, to want to embark on a blockchain project on their own, simply because your market size and whether the ROI for that is makes sense for you to put that kind of investment on your own. So it does require the government authorities and the agencies to actually come together and to provide that kind of environment. So whether it's like JAKIM and HDC and all the other governing bodies to actually work together to create that environment and the platforms for MSME participation. So that's for the first question. The second question about whether we have done any collaboration, we've actually done a couple of POCs. I think one of them was with HDC, another one with Selangor State Agency. So we have done a couple of POCs before. It's just, again, a matter of whether the take-up and the readiness of the organization at that time. So that was a few years back. I know that there are some other, we are in talks with some other associations involving like MTA, for example, and there is definitely interest in how to get blockchain adoption in the ecosystem. But that is still a conversation that needs to get the buy-in of, I think, members of the industry for a clear use case. I think that way, that kind of support and that kind of industry support, when they can safely say that, yes, this is something that is urgent, that is needed, and that has value, and will yield this kind of ROI, then it makes it easier for us to have that conversation. But yeah, we're happy, we would be more than happy to look at the deployment in a halal supply chain case. As we have deployed something like this before, it's just a matter of making the adjustments to fit the Sharia compliance requirements. Other than that, I don't see any issue at all for us to, to work with any organization to help reinforce the halal supply chain. Thank you. Okay, with that, thank you.